UK citizens living elsewhere in the European Union. We should aim to strike an early agreement about their rights. What does that mean? Well, it means this is going to be a priority in these talks. Of course, the talks are going to go on for a couple of years, but they haven't got there yet. And there's no conciliatory move from the UK to say, listen, we're going to take the first move on that. That is part of these negotiations. There's plenty more besides, and we'll bring you more detail over the course of the day from this letter.
Ed, thanks for that expert analysis, and with apologies to Michael Gove, let's get a view of more experts now. Joining me to discuss this historic moment are Professor Anand Menon, who is Director of the UK in the Changing Europe Initiative, Lucy Thomas, Head of Brexit Advice at Edelman, and Matthew Elliott, a Senior Fellow at the think tank, the Legatum Institute, and former CEO of Vote Leave. Welcome to you all. We've finally got the outlines now of Britain's negotiating position in this letter. First of all, what do you make of what Mrs May is saying?
Well, from my point of view, there's less substance than I would have liked. There's quite a lot of generality, and it's pretty much what she said before. The one bit that really
more conciliatory than perhaps a lot of the rhetoric.
The tone is more conciliatory, and the one thing that really struck me is the bit where she said if we fall out on WTO terms, it will make security cooperation more difficult. That really stood out for me as a kind of, look, there's a whole package of things we should be talking about here, so let's make this work right so we can cooperate across the piece.
Lucy Thomas.
I agree, and actually I think that conciliatory tone is really marked. I think both Theresa May in the Commons and also Philip Hammond earlier, both were really clear to say we don't want to cherry pick. We accept that, you know, we have to do this in a spirit of cooperation and working together, but also that there will be some downsides and that we will have to accept rules going forward. And I think if you contrast that to what we've heard Donald Tusk saying and what the leader of the centre-right grouping in the European Parliament, straight out of the blocks, they've said this is about the 27 coming together, almost being more united. We care about our citizens more than we care about the UK, and that's quite concerning.
I mean, a few days ago, Boris Johnson saying, well, no deal, that'd be fine. Mrs May obviously doesn't think like that.
Well, the key line for me was when she said we're leaving the European Union, not leaving Europe, and that's a good reminder that we will still be part of the continent, we'll still need to cooperate, still need to trade, still need to be a good neighbour, work together on security, on the environment, and other things.
That's the point. She thinks we still need to work together, which is not what some of the hardline Brexiteers have been saying.
I think Boris Johnson, in all his statements at Vote Leave, I remember him always making that point. We will still work together.
And no deal will be fine.
Countries.
That's what he said. That's not what she's saying.
Well, I think we will get a deal. That's the point. I think within 2 years we'll get a good deal with the EU and also get that sort of free trade deal we need to make sure that trade continues.
Plus, we also heard from Donald Tusk saying goodbye and thank you, and saying it was not a happy day, but saying he had a strong mandate to represent the other 27 nations who remain in the European Union. What do you see as the main bones of contention over the next 2 years?
Well, there's a general mode of contention, which is the fact that we sometimes forget that for the 27, unity is an end in itself. So actually preserving their unity, preserving the rules of the game, for some of them at least, matters far more than actually any short-term economic gains or losses from the deal. The second thing, of course, is the money, the so-called Brexit bill. That will be the first bone of contention in these talks. They will say to us, we think you're liable for this list of things. We'll say, actually, that list is too long, and we'll have to see if the politics allows us to resolve that amicably, and if that more conciliatory tone lasts through the discussion of money.
I mean, do you think that he did say, use the words, he said, the lowest possible cost? I mean, that implies the bill will be quite big.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and clearly, as Anand says, everyone has something at stake. This is the most symbolic part of the talks. It's the first thing that's going to be up for discussion alongside the rights of EU citizens here and UK citizens abroad. But clearly, nobody really wants to blink. The UK has accepted that we do have legal obligations and commitments, and I think that haggling will really show and strike a tone for the forthcoming negotiations.
Very clear from her tone, isn't it, that this is not just about money. I mean, this is about security, it's about freedom of movement. It's much broader. In her view, Brexit is much more than just how much money we may or may not get back on the side of a bus.
It absolutely is. It's about Britain, as she said, taking back control, to use our phrase we had in the campaign. of having that democratic future where we've got accountable government and a sovereign nation again.
Can I just
You're
say,
laughing at that, why?
Well, on taking back control, actually Theresa May conceded in the House this afternoon that we will have to accept rules and regulations which we no longer set, that our businesses will have to abide by regulations which we don't control. So
But she made the point as well that when we trade with the United States, again, we've got to accept control and regulations from the US.
Absolutely, but saying we will concede control as we leave the EU will continue to control rules which will bound our businesses. And bound
this
the
has
UK.
always been the case.
Let's take the big historic perspective. I mean, this word historic has been used.
Yep.
But in the end, Britain, even when it was still in the European Union, or it still is now, hadn't fully participated in the euro, greater integration, had various other opt-outs. The Prime Minister says, look, we're going to reach new agreements with Europe. In the end, is this possibly going to be an all fuss about nothing? That actually we are still part of Europe, they are still in special partnership with us, so what? This is a slight organisational rejig and nothing more.
I think it depends where we end up. If we end up outside the customs union, how do we get round having a border between the north and the south of Ireland? That's a really big political issue. That's not just a
except
technicality.
both sides saying they're aware of that and they can sort it.
Well, both sides are saying they're aware of that. There are plenty of lawyers who are scratching their heads saying, we don't know how you sort it. If you're out of the customs union, how do you have customs checks without a physical border? There are lots of things to be considered. And, you know, what happens if we have if we're out of the customs union to the ports of the south of England? Will we suddenly get lorries parking on the motorway because all of a sudden they're stopping where they didn't have to in the past? There are lots of things that need to be sorted out. I'm not saying they can't be sorted out. What I'm saying, though, is it's far from a sort of boring technical thing. This will impact on us if it goes wrong.
What do you think? A truly historic moment? Will people still be talking about this day in 100 years' time?
I think they really will be. This is the first step to us leaving. The big party, of course, will be in 2 years' time when we actually leave.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm afraid to say actually the sight of Theresa May signing that letter last night did result in me shedding a tear. So it is, I mean, for me it's really emotional. It's sad. I wanted us to remain, but I do think it's happening. It's a democratic decision. We've got to be constructive and push for the best possible deal.
OK, well, that's the view of the experts here in Westminster. What about the people of Clacton-on-Sea enjoying a visit from Kay Burley today? Kay?
Great question.